From Emory Jones, who held it down in prison for Jay-Z only to feel betrayed in the end, to Haven Irby, the man who once took a bullet for him and later called him a traitor, to Diddy, now caught in federal charges that could destroy everything. Here's what really happened to Jay-Z's most dangerous allies. Let's begin with Haven Irby. Our first story is perhaps the most tragic and controversial of them all. Haven Irby, the childhood friend who claims he introduced Jay-Z to the drug game. Haven, who's 6 months older than Jay-Z, grew up with him in the same building, on the same floor in the Marcy projects. They were inseparable. More than friends, they were brothers in every sense of the word. According to Haven, he was the one who taught Jay-Z the ropes of street life, including how to navigate deals and avoid risks. They hustled together in the late 1980s and early 1990s, moving cocaine from New York to places like Trenton, New Jersey, and Maryland. But here's where the story gets intense. Haven claims that one night during an uptown drug deal, everything went wrong.
Any issues he ever had, I handled that. From reasonable doubt, when he sit here and tell you, my man got his side sprayed up on Uptown Block, that's me. That's me with this scar from here up here. So he never had no street issues. Rob him, I'm going to see them. You understand? When I go see them got me on the floor with the guns, surrounded with the guns to my head. Behind him. Only thing saved my life is me really knowing these niggas. They spared my life.
Haven was shot protecting Jay-Z, taking a bullet in the side during an ambush. He waved down a cab, gave Jay-Z the drugs and money, and told him to get his mother and meet him at the hospital. This moment, according to Haven, proved his ultimate loyalty. Jay-Z even referenced this incident in Dead Presidents 2 from his debut album, Reasonable Doubt, rapping about his man getting his side sprayed up on an uptown block. But the real betrayal came years later. In the early 2000s, Haven was arrested on federal drug trafficking charges. He claims that during his trial, Jay-Z looked him in the face and promised support, saying, "Don't worry about it, bro, I got you." But then, according to Haven, Jay-Z completely ghosted him. No visits, no money for lawyers, no support for his family.
Look at me in my face, right? During my trial, look at me in my face telling me, yo, don't worry about it, bro. I got you. And I never see him again.
Haven fought his case and won, beating the charges without cooperating with authorities. But by then, the damage was done. He came home to find himself homeless and struggling, while Jay-Z had become one of the biggest stars in hip-hop. The beef escalated when Jay-Z released No Hook in 2007, with the line, "Fuck Haven for caving, that's why we don't speak," implying Haven had snitched during his trial. Haven has consistently denied these allegations, stating in multiple interviews that he never cooperated and has no paperwork proving otherwise. The situation became even more complicated when Haven revealed that upon his release, he discovered Jay-Z was now partnering with Desiree Perez, Haven's ex-girlfriend from the early 1990s, who had become a federal informant in a major drug case and later became CEO of Roc Nation. Today, Haven is 55 years old and living a low-key life, appearing on podcasts and running an Instagram series called The Marcy Maid to tell his side of the story. In recent 2024 interviews, he's called Jay-Z a coward and stated that reconciliation is impossible, though he says he's forgiven him for his own peace of mind. Sean Diddy Combs. Now we come to perhaps the most explosive and current story on this list. Sean Diddy Combs, Jay-Z's longtime friend, collaborator, and fellow mogul who is currently facing some of the most serious allegations in hip-hop history. For decades, Diddy and Jay-Z have been linked as two of the most successful figures to emerge from the streets to build entertainment empires.
It's 2020, y'all. Yeah. And it's different than when it was 2016. You know, the game has been elevated. As we can tell, there's no expense being spared. We had a black billionaire's line.
Their relationship dates back to the late 1990s, when both were establishing themselves as not just artists, but business moguls. They collaborated on tracks, co-hosted industry events, and were frequently seen together at parties and gatherings. Their bond seemed unshakable. Two Brooklyn to Harlem kids who had conquered the music industry and built billion-dollar brands. They co-owned ventures, attended each other's celebrations, and presented a united front as Black excellence in entertainment. entertainment. But in September 2024, everything changed. Diddy was arrested on federal charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, and coercion involving what prosecutors called freak-off parties, dating back to 2008. The indictment painted a disturbing picture of Diddy, allegedly using his power and influence to coerce women into drug-fueled sexual performances, often recorded without consent. He pleaded not guilty, but the evidence seemed overwhelming, with over 100 accusers coming forward with similar stories. Then came the bombshell that directly implicated Jay-Z. In December 2024, a civil lawsuit was amended to accuse both Diddy and Jay-Z of raping a 13-year-old girl at an after-party following the 2000 MTV Video Music Awards. The anonymous plaintiff, represented by attorney Tony Busby, claimed she was lured by a limousine driver, drugged, and then assaulted by both men, while an unnamed female celebrity watched but didn't intervene. Jay-Z's response was immediate and fierce. He denied the allegations completely, calling them heinous and accusing Busby of extortion and blackmail. His lawyer, Alex Spiro, filed a countersuit claiming Busby had demanded a settlement to keep the suit private, which Jay-Z refused, stating he would never settle false claims because it would only encourage more false accusations against celebrities. Jay-Z emphasized that he had never been close friends with Diddy, despite their public appearances together. Diddy still remains in federal custody awaiting trial on the original criminal charges. Meanwhile, Jay-Z has tried to distance himself publicly, with his lawyer stating in interviews that despite decades of public friendship, they aren't close friends, a claim many find hard to believe given their documented history of collaborations, parties, and business ventures together. Emory, Vegas, Jones. Now, here's a story with a different ending, one that shows what happens when loyalty goes both ways. Emory Jones, nicknamed Vegas for his flashy style, met Jay-Z around 1989 during their prime hustling days in Brooklyn and New Jersey. They were deep in the cocaine trade, with Jones handling logistics and distribution alongside Jay-Z.
Who is Emory Jones? Who is Emory Jones?
Humble soul, that's who I am. Just a humble soul that just happened to have a great best friend and brother named Jay-Z as part of the story.
Jay-Z idolized Jones's business acumen and loyalty, referencing him in tracks like Allure as a figure who exemplified both the rewards and dangers of the street life. Jones was part of Jay-Z's inner circle as he transitioned into music, providing that crucial street credibility to early Rockefeller ventures. But unlike the Haven story, this one takes a very different turn. In the early 2000s, Jones was arrested on federal drug trafficking charges related to cocaine distribution. He was sentenced to approximately 16 years in prison in 2003, serving time in facilities like FCI Fort Dix. Now, here's where the story diverges dramatically from DeHaven's experience. Jay-Z demonstrated rare loyalty throughout Jones's entire incarceration. During Jones's time behind bars, Jay-Z visited him multiple times, sent financial support to his family, and even referenced his plight in his lyrics to keep his name alive. This wasn't just talk. Jay-Z literally kept Jones's name relevant in the culture while he was locked away, ensuring that when he came home, there would be opportunities waiting. Jones has openly discussed this in interviews, saying that Jay-Z's actions during his darkest hours proved he was solid and that their bond was unbreakable. This loyalty wasn't just emotional, it was practical and life-changing. When Jones was released around 2019 after benefiting from sentencing reforms and good behavior, he didn't come home to nothing. Instead, he was immediately brought into the Roc Nation family. Today, at around 55 years old, Emory Jones is thriving as the head of Roc Nation's apparel division. He's launched incredibly successful collaborations, including a Puma partnership that resulted in his own signature sneaker line in 2023, something almost unheard of for someone who isn't an athlete or entertainer. His work emphasizes themes of redemption, second chances, and betting on yourself, which is literally the name of his signature project, Notorious B.I.G. When we talk about Jay-Z's Deadliest affiliates, we have to address the Notorious B.I.G., born Christopher Wallace, one of his earliest and most influential connections in hip-hop. Biggie and Jay-Z were both Brooklyn natives trying to make it in the rap game during the early 1990s, and their relationship was complex. Part friendship, part rivalry, but always respectful. They collaborated on the legendary track Brooklyn's Finest from Jay-Z's debut album Reasonable Doubt in 1996, a song that showcased both of their lyrical abilities and cemented cemented their status as two of Brooklyn's best. There were even plans for them to form a supergroup called The Commission, along with other top-tier rappers, which would have been one of the most formidable crews in hip-hop history, given their street credibility and talent. However, their relationship wasn't without tension. As both of their careers accelerated, there were rumors of competition and underlying friction. Biggie was already a superstar with Bad Boy Records, while Jay-Z was still grinding with his independent Rockefeller label. Some accounts suggest their relationship had begun to sour over territorial issues and the natural competitiveness of two alpha males vying for the crown of New York's best rapper. Then came the tragedy that shook hip-hop to its core. On March 9th, 1997, Biggie was gunned down in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles, leaving a Soul Train Music Awards party. He was just 24 years old, at the absolute peak of his powers, with his album Life After Death about to drop. The murder happened amid the infamous East Coast-West Coast rap feud that had already claimed Tupac Shakur 6 months earlier.
It was like, I went from, like shock. I just couldn't believe it. Like, I just got finished talking to this man on the phone. Like, it wasn't even, he's in the club, like having the time of his life, It was just like that, it just couldn't happen.
The killing remains officially unsolved, though. Theories abound linking it to rivalries involving Death Row Records, Suge Knight, and the ongoing coastal beef that had turned deadly. What made it even more tragic was that Biggie had traveled to Los Angeles trying to promote peace and his new album, Not Looking for Trouble. He was ambushed at a red light, shot multiple times, and died shortly after at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. For Jay-Z, Biggie's death was a pivotal moment. He has paid tribute to Biggie numerous times in his music, honoring his legacy and acknowledging their connection. But there's always been speculation about Jay-Z's role, or lack thereof, in the East-West beef. Some have questioned whether he could have done more to prevent the escalation, while others have suggested he benefited from Biggie's death by filling the void left by Brooklyn's king, Calvin Klein Bacall. Moving deeper into Jay-Z's past, we need to talk about Calvin Bacall, known as Klein, a name that might not ring bells for casual fans, but was absolutely legendary in 1980s Brooklyn. Klein wasn't just another hustler. He was a notorious drug kingpin who Jay-Z looked up to as a big brother figure and mentor in the game. Starting around 1989, Jay-Z began hustling under Klein's wing, learning the intricacies of scaling operations and evading law enforcement. Klein's operation was massive, involving stick-ups and large-scale cocaine distribution before he linked up with the young Sean Carter. The relationship was so impactful that Jay-Z immortalized Klein in multiple songs, most famously in Allure, where he raps about riding shotgun in Klein's green BMW 5 Series, and in December 4th, where he portrays Klein as a symbol of the addictive nature of street life. Klein's influence on Jay-Z went beyond just drug-dealing tactics. He represented a lifestyle, a level of success in the streets that seemed untouchable at the time. Klein taught Jay-Z about presentation, about carrying yourself like a boss even when the cops were circling. That Klein nickname itself was a nod to the designer brand Calvin Klein, reflecting his stylish demeanor and his approach to the game. Everything had to look good. Everything had to be calculated. But like so many in that era, Klein's empire eventually crumbled in the 1990s. He faced multiple arrests and was eventually convicted on drug and weapons charges, beginning a prison sentence that would last over a decade starting around 1994. During one particular bust, there are claims that Jay-Z was allegedly present but managed to escape charges, with some suggesting that Klein took the fall to protect him, though this has never been definitively proven. What's interesting about Klein's story compared to others on this list is that he doesn't harbor the same level of resentment. Released in the mid-2000s, Klein transitioned to legitimate work, appearing in documentaries and doing interviews about his past life. He even had a brief acting stint, including a role in the 2002 film Paid in Full, which dramatized the era they all lived through. In his interviews, particularly a detailed 2014 Vlad TV series, Klein speaks about his partnership with Jay-Z with a sense of pride rather than bitterness. He praises Jay-Z's intelligence and business acumen, acknowledging that even back then, you could see Sean Carter was destined for something bigger than the streets. Klein has noted that the game's dangers, the constant threat of violence, imprisonment, or death, made his time behind bars feel like a blessing in disguise because it ultimately saved his life. Kareem, Biggs, Burke. Now we're getting into the business side of Jay-Z's affiliates, and Kareem Burke, known as Biggs, represents one of the most important partnerships in hip-hop history. Biggs was one of Jay-Z's closest business affiliates and co-founded Rockefeller Records in 1994, alongside Jay-Z and Damon Dash. But before the music empire, Burke had his own reputation in the streets. Biggs was involved in street hustling with Jay-Z, and crucially, he provided seed money from drug profits to launch the label. His deadly reputation stemmed from his low-key but influential role in the cocaine trade during the late 1980s and early 1990s. While he wasn't as flashy as some others, Biggs' street connections and business sense made him invaluable in funding early ventures like Rocawear Clothing, which would eventually become a multi-million-dollar brand. For years, everything seemed perfect. Rockefeller became one of the most successful independent labels in hip-hop, releasing classic albums and building an empire that extended far beyond music. But Biggs' past eventually caught up with him in a major way. In 2010, Biggs was arrested as part of Operation Green Venom, a massive federal investigation targeting a marijuana trafficking ring that spanned multiple states. This wasn't some small-time operation. We're talking about a sophisticated network moving hundreds of kilograms of marijuana across state lines. Burke pleaded guilty to conspiring to distribute over 100 kilograms of marijuana and was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison in 2012. What happened during those 5 years is actually quite remarkable. Burke served his time in facilities like USP Canaan, using his incarceration for deep self-reflection. He found religion, giving his life to Christ, and when he participated in a 2017 Reddit AMA after his release, he spoke openly about his spiritual transformation and the lessons he learned behind bars. Released in 2016, Burke immediately sought to distance himself from the drama that had plagued Rockefeller. In multiple 2025 interviews on platforms like Drink Champs, he clarified something crucial. The 2004 split when Jay-Z sold Rockefeller to Def Jam wasn't actually a hostile breakup as media had portrayed it. According to Biggs, it was a planned exit that made business sense at the time, though the execution and aftermath created tensions. Today, in his 50s, Biggs has completely reinvented himself. He focuses on philanthropy, launched a luxury fashion brand, and dedicates significant time to mentoring young entrepreneurs in legitimate business. Damon Dash. When we talk about Jay-Z's affiliates, we absolutely have to address Damon Dash, even though he wasn't strictly from the streets in the same way as others on this list. Dame was a hustler in a different sense. He had roots in Harlem's street culture, but his real gift was in business and promotion. Together with Jay-Z and Biggs Burke, they co-founded Rockefeller Records in 1995, and Dame's aggressive entrepreneurial spirit was instrumental in the label's early success. Dame was the CEO, the face of the operation, the one making noise while Jay-Z focused on the music. He secured distribution deals, negotiated with bigger labels, and built Rockefeller's reputation as an independent force that played by its own rules. They expanded into fashion with Rocawear, film production with Rockefeller Films, and seemed unstoppable throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, but cracks began to show. The problem started around 2004 when Jay-Z sold his stake in Rockefeller Records to Def Jam and became president of the larger label. Dame felt betrayed, believing Jay-Z had essentially dismantled what they built together. From Dame's perspective, Jay-Z chose corporate America over the independence they'd fought for. And worse, he did it in a way that left Dame and Biggs on the outside looking in. The fallout was messy and public. Dame accused Jay-Z of being disloyal and going corporate, while Jay-Z's camp suggested Dame's erratic behavior and poor business decisions made the split inevitable. What followed was years of subliminal dices in interviews, with Dame becoming increasingly vocal about feeling used and discarded once he was no longer useful to Jay-Z's ascension. Things got worse financially for Dame. He filed for bankruptcy in 2015, losing significant assets and facing multiple lawsuits. His relationship with Jay-Z didn't just cost him a business partner, it effectively shut him out of many opportunities in the industry, as few wanted to take sides against someone as powerful as Jay-Z had become. There were legal battles over Rocawear, disputes about master recordings, and a general sense that Dame had been systematically pushed out of everything they'd built together. As recently as 2024, Dame has called Jay-Z ruthless in interviews, accusing him of blocking his business ventures and using his power to ensure Dame couldn't rise again. He's spoken about how Jay-Z's team would allegedly interfere with deals he was trying to make, how doors would mysteriously close once people learned he was attached to a project, and how the industry essentially blackballed him at Jay-Z's behest. Lance "Un" Rivera. Our story takes us to one of the most shocking and well-documented incidents in Jay-Z's life, the 1999 stabbing of record executive Lance "Un" Rivera at a nightclub party, an attack that nearly killed Rivera and resulted in Jay-Z's only criminal conviction. The incident occurred at a Kit Kat Club party, celebrating the release of Q-Tip's album Amplified on December 9, 1999. Jay-Z was already a platinum-selling artist, riding high on the success of Volume 2 Hard Knock Life, but he was about to drop Volume 3 Life and Times of S. Carter and was paranoid about bootleggers. According to accounts, Jay-Z suspected Rivera of being behind the bootlegging of his upcoming album, which was devastating to artists in that pre-streaming era because it could kill album sales. When Jay-Z spotted Rivera at the party, tensions immediately flared. What happened next became the stuff of hip-hop legend. Jay-Z stabbed Rivera in the stomach and back, causing serious injuries that required emergency medical treatment and stitches. The wound was deep enough that it could have been fatal if it had struck vital organs. The attack was witnessed by multiple people, and the aftermath was captured by news cameras as Rivera was rushed to the hospital. Jay-Z initially fled the scene but turned himself into police the next day, accompanied by his lawyer. He was charged with assault and initially pleaded not guilty, maintaining he was innocent. However, as the case progressed and evidence mounted, including witness testimony and the severity of Rivera's injuries, Jay-Z changed his plea in 2001, admitting guilt to third-degree assault. He received 3 years of probation, the lightest possible sentence that allowed him to avoid jail time and continue his music career. In his 2010 memoir, Decoded, Jay-Z addressed the incident, calling it a loss of control and expressing regret for letting his emotions override his judgment. He acknowledged that the stabbing was a moment of street mentality overtaking his business sense, a reminder that no matter how successful he'd become, the streets were still in him. It was a wake-up call that could have derailed everything he'd built. Rivera, for his part, survived and eventually moved on with his life. He went on to produce films like The Perfect Holiday and work in the entertainment industry, though the stabbing remained a defining moment in both men's lives. Interestingly, in 2023, Rivera recanted his testimony, claiming that Jay-Z wasn't actually the one who stabbed him and that he'd taken the fall for someone else, a claim that Nas had actually made back in his diss track Ether in 2001, suggesting Jay-Z was protecting another member of his crew. Rivera has spoken about eventually forgiving Jay-Z, saying he understood the paranoia and pressure of that era. Jaz O. Jaz O, born Jonathan Burks, was Jay-Z's early mentor in hip-hop, the person who gave him his first real exposure to the rap game. While Jaz O wasn't deeply involved in the street hustling to the same degree as others on this list, his relationship with Jay-Z is important because it established a pattern that would repeat throughout Jay-Z's career, using people for what they offered, then discarding them when they were no longer useful. In the late 1980s, Jaz O was already an established rapper on the underground scene, and he took the young Sean Carter under his wing. He gave Jay-Z his stage name, a variation of Jaz O's own name, brought him on tour, including a trip to London in 1988, and featured him on tracks to help build his reputation. Jaz O taught Jay-Z about stage presence, how to structure verses, and essentially how to be a professional rapper beyond just freestyle battles in the streets. For a while, they were tight. Jay-Z served as Jaz O's hype man, learning the business while getting exposure to audiences. But as Jay-Z's skills developed and opportunities arose, the relationship began to shift. By the mid-1990s, when Jay-Z co-founded Rockefeller Records, he essentially moved on from Jaz O without bringing him along for the ride. The specific breaking point is unclear, but it likely involved business and ego. Jaz O felt disrespected, believing Jay-Z owed him more for the early support and mentorship. From Jay-Z's perspective, he'd outgrown Jaz O and didn't owe him a career just because they'd worked together years earlier. The tension simmered for years before exploding publicly. In the mid-2000s, Jaz O released several diss tracks aimed at Jay-Z, including Get Your Proper Paper and Love Is Lost, accusing him of being disloyal and forgetting where he came from. The tracks were harsh, personal attacks that detailed their history, and suggested Jay-Z had used him as a stepping stone. Jay-Z, characteristically, didn't respond directly in music, instead letting his success speak for itself and treating Jaz O's attacks as beneath acknowledgement. What made the situation worse for Jaz O was that he was right about being forgotten. Jay-Z rarely mentioned him in interviews or gave him credit for his early influence, instead focusing on other figures when discussing his come-up. It was as if those years never happened, a erasure that clearly stung Jaz O deeply. Today, Jaz O is alive and occasionally releases music, but he's largely a forgotten figure in hip-hop, despite his legitimate contributions to Jay-Z's early development. Calvin, Uncle Buzz. Calvin, known as Uncle Buzz, is another figure who played a crucial role but has been largely written out of Jay-Z's official history. Uncle Buzz was Haven Irby's actual uncle and was already established in Trenton, New Jersey when the crew expanded their operations there in the early 1990s.
My Uncle Buzz, like he had this police look with him, right? So he was easier to move up and down the highway. You know what I'm saying? Police, we'd be in a whole nother car, but the police would look at my uncle and be like, man, this nigga like the police, he keep going. He just had a police look.
Uncle Buzz's role was specifically logistical and transportation based because he had what DeHaven described as a police look, presumably meaning he appeared clean cut, professional, and non-threatening. He was perfect for moving product up and down the interstate without drawing suspicion. The crew operated out of DeHaven's aunt's house in Trenton, where Uncle Buzz already lived, creating a family operation that provided a level of trust and security, crucial for their activities. This was the same house where Jay-Z would eventually live for extended periods, moving from weekends to weeks to essentially becoming a permanent resident until he committed fully to music. DeHaven has referenced him as one of the silent kings, people who played crucial roles but never received recognition or acknowledgement for their contributions. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.